Afternoon, everyone. This is session 2.1. We had to start somewhere applying the anti-racist LibGuide framework created by Jamie Ding and the Cal Poly team. We do have Jamie Ding with us today from California, as well as my UNC colleagues, Michelle, Stacy, Carolyn, Sarah, and Jamie Conklin. They have a lot to cover in a short period of time, so I'm just going to go ahead and turn everything over to them.
Can everyone see my screen?
Yeah, we can.
Sorry about that. So hello, everyone. I'm Stacy Torian. Stacy Torian of the Health Sciences Library at UNC Chapel Hill, and I'm here today with my co-presenters, and we are going to be talking about how we are updating our LibGuides using an anti-racist framework. I titled the presentation, We Had to Start Somewhere, because I think the prospect of updating LibGuides can be an intimidating one in itself. And I hope that today's presentation will leave you with some pointers and ideas that you can use to make the process more manageable.
Stacy, I'm going to interrupt you real quick. You're sharing your presenter view right now and not the slides. So, but yeah, there you go. Okay,
so great, thank you so much. We'll start by talking about what inspired us to do the work at the Health Sciences Library, how we got started and got organized, and how we adapted Cal Poly's rubric for evaluating LibGuides to suit our needs at the Health Sciences Library. And then we'll share some of the lessons we learned, how we plan to proceed moving forward, and some of the evaluations we did of our own LibGuides, as well as the evaluation tool that we're using. And then Jamie Ding will talk about some of the work that they're doing at Cal Poly, and then we'll have a group activity and a group discussion. So the inspiration for this work was a presentation done by Jamie Ding of California Polytechnic State University in August of last year. Jamie did a presentation for the Association of Southeastern Research Libraries, in which she talked about the work that she and her colleagues at Cal Poly were doing to update their LibGuides using an anti-racist framework. And I thought that the presentation was very thought-provoking. There were several points that she made that really got me to thinking, and one was that LibGuides could be considered works of scholarship that need critical review. I had never really thought about LibGuides in that way before, but if you think about it, it does really make sense that the librarian is sort of like an editor of a collection when doing a LibGuide and putting these resources together and presenting them to the public. She also encouraged us to ask some questions when applying an anti-racist lens to LibGuide, some thought-provoking questions. How do you define scholarship and best sources? Why were certain sources selected over others? Does the guide include works by authors of color? We know that a lot of the guidelines and standards that we use to decide whether a source is scholarship or whether it's reliable are based on standards that were created at historically white institutions and publishing houses, and that these are places that don't necessarily have a history of being welcoming to authors of color or people of color in general. So these are questions and issues that were on our minds as we were doing our work at UNC Chapel Hill. So we got started by presenting our ideas to the Health Sciences Library staff. As I said, I work at the Health Sciences Library. I actually work with the Clinical Academic and Research Engagement Unit. And we first presented the ideas like in a small group setting. Those of us who had attended Jamie Ding's presentation presented the ideas. Michelle, our supervisor, was really intrigued by the anti-racist LibGuide framework idea and wanted to pursue applying it to our own LibGuides. And so Michelle arranged for me and her to do a presentation with the Health Sciences Library staff as a whole. And the response from our library colleagues was very encouraging. Several people wanted to help volunteer with the work. And after that, Michelle assembled an initial team to work on this. And that team being comprised of the people that you see here today. And she also made this one of the diversity, equity, and inclusion and accessibility goals for our unit. So after the Health Sciences Library meeting, we started to kind of organize ourselves. We began with the timeline that Michelle had created for us that was presented at the Health Sciences Library staff meeting. And this timeline was actually already kind of done, but we revisited it and made sure it seemed feasible, and that we had picked out a few, we wanted to pick out a few guides that we could, try the anti-racist framework out on initially. So we did that. And then Michelle scheduled some weekly meetings so that we'd have time blocked out in our calendars to really do this work, designated time to just brainstorm and plan and do what we need to do and document our progress. And so this is the timeline that I was referring to. And you can see we're kind of in the beginning part of it now. We're developing a tool. We're at the end of developing a tool to pilot on the LibGuides, doing some of that initial work. And then we're going to solicit some feedback from the Health Sciences Library and the University of North Carolina University Libraries this spring, and the liaisons in the Health Sciences Library who work with different departments. We're going to continue to update LibGuides throughout the summer, and in the fall, we'll be evaluating our progress. So as I mentioned earlier, Cal Poly has developed an anti-racism rubric for evaluating their guides. And we were really excited about that rubric when we first got started, doing our work, and we were ready to adapt it and tweak it and try to make it our own, make it suit our needs. But once we started doing our work, we realized that we really needed to step back a little bit and think about the values that were driving our work, because those are the values that we would need to be thinking about when creating the categories for the rubric. And so we used like a Google Jamboard to just brainstorm, about ideas and values, and talk through those and kind of group them together, similar values into some similar categories. And then we mapped the categories that we had to the ones that the Cal Poly anti-racist LibGuide rubric had. And we kept a lot of those categories and we modified some of them. And then we added our own categories here and there, like the health sciences lens, because we work in a health sciences library. And then we had a discussion about whether we should have a rubric, which is more like a scoring guide sort of, or an evaluation tool, which is more just sort of guidelines, a little bit looser. And then we came up with some tiered recommendations that that people can use when they're updating their guides, realizing that people don't always have the same amount of time to do this work. And so the recommendations are tiered, meaning that they're grouped according to the amount of time that it might take to complete them. And so my colleagues will be going into a lot more of this later in the presentation, and you'll have a chance to dig into it more deeply too during the group activity. So right now I'm going to just hand things over to Carolyn Welker, who's going to talk about lessons learned and what our next steps are.
All right, so my name is Carolyn, and I'm currently a graduate assistant at the Health Sciences Library. So our next step was kind of reflecting on the work that we had done thus far. So we started with those values that Stacy mentioned that we had kind of brainstormed a list of to see if we thought that those were being met by the tool that we had kind of been working to create. And we also talked about deciding what story we wanted to tell or argument we wanted to make in our LibGuides. That might look a little bit different for each LibGuide depending on the subject matter. And then we started to kind of apply or try out that rubric, that tool that we created on a few of our guides, tweaking the tool along the way, because we noticed that once we started to kind of apply it, that we encountered things that we hadn't thought of just in the brainstorming session that we thought really helped make the tool stronger overall. And we also have a couple recommendations. So we tried to have 2 people work on each guide when the resources were available, because this helps kind of eliminate some of the personal bias that might be introduced. And we also thought it was really important to document our work as we went along through the process, just so we kind of had evidence backing up the decision-making process. And we could also see how things changed over the course of the work that we were doing. So Stacy, if you'll go to the next slide, thank you. All right, so our next steps are first to solicit feedback from users and other librarians. Like I said, we noticed with each kind of iteration of the tool, each time that we had a chance to go back and look at it, that we kind of tweaked a little bit here, tweaked a little bit there. So we see this as an ongoing conversation. It's going to continue to change, and we want to continue to make the tool better and better. So after we solicit feedback, we'll be addressing that feedback, and we think it's really important to stay transparent about the decision-making process. And we also recognize that there's a chance that you may face bumps in the road. We have not had any resistance, but we have thought through how we would handle potential arguments against the work that we were doing. So, Stacy, if you'll go to my next slide. Perfect. So these are some of the potential issues that we thought it was important to kind of think through. Again, we have not encountered any of these issues ourselves. But the first argument we thought people might make was that this work takes a really long time, especially if you're talking about doing a review of all of your existing LibGuides. That's a really significant undertaking. But for that, we think it's really important to consider the long history of racism and racist practices, and also understand that this work is not optional. Second, we thought that people might try and argue that this isn't really relevant to the type of LibGuides that they have at their institution. But we would recommend that you kind of research the origin stories behind the technology, and that you investigate the history of whatever discipline it is that your LibGuides are within. You'll likely uncover some information that would help to counter this argument. And then finally, the argument that we shouldn't include an author solely based on race. And to that, we recommend that you examine current practices around vetting authors, and also acknowledge the quality of scholarship by authors of color. So now I'm going to turn this over to Jamie Conklin.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jamie. I'm a health sciences librarian and liaison to the School of Nursing, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the application of what we've done so far. So first, I want to introduce our evaluation tool, and Carolyn is going to place that in the chat. So thank you, Carolyn. You'll notice on the tool, and you'll get to look at this more in depth with the upcoming activity we're going to do, but you'll notice on the left that we list the 10 categories, and each one has a description and some recommended resources for more information. The middle section has a list of actions with the tiered recommendations that Stacy mentioned. And then, and to mention those actions, we hope that all LibGuides can attain a level to include everything that you see there. And then on the far right is simply space for reviewers to include notes as they review the guide. And then Stacy, the next slide, please. So a little bit more about our tiered reviewed recommendations. We thought that by creating tiers based on level of effort, that would help us envision our work as a process and also help us break the work into manageable bits of time. So I'm thinking of Fabazi Ibar's presentation this morning. If we need to figure out timelines and know how big of a task that we have ahead of us, that hopefully these can help us. The times that we list are just examples. But for example, something that might be in tier 1, least intensive, that may take a week or so, is adding statements acknowledging racism. Whereas something that's more intensive, requiring 2 to 4 weeks, might be meeting with subject matter experts around our guides and seeking out works by authors of color through research and through conversations. And then finally, something that might be the most intensive, that may require 4 more weeks, is something like Carolyn was mentioning, was locating resources and looking more in depth at the history of racism within the field that we're discussing on the guide. Next slide, please. Please, Stacy. And so what I'd like to do next is show you the LGBTQIA+ health guide. And this is a guide that Stacy created around the time that Jamie did her presentation, and we were thinking through these rubric elements. And so I recommend that you look at Stacy's guide as an example where she's put a lot of effort into this anti-racist framework. And you'll notice on the homepage of this guide that Stacy clearly acknowledges the racial, heterosexist, and cisgender bias that's found in health sciences literature. The guide speaks clearly to a wide range of audiences, including patients, researchers, educators, and more. Stacy incorporated search strategies and also talked on the guide about the problems related to vocabulary for the LGBTQIA+ community, especially when you're thinking about subject headings within databases. I've directed students to this guide multiple times already, and they always appreciate the search strategies and thinking through that for their projects. In addition, Stacy engaged readers through reflective questions, and she included a variety of resources and formats. So I highly recommend you check out this guide after our presentation today. Next, Stacy. Next, I'll share an example of my guide. So my guide is the Nursing LibGuide, and I'm just at the very beginning stages. So as of now, I've not made any changes to my guide. So you would see mine as a starting place. And so far, we are using our evaluation tool to evaluate and review my guide. And I can clearly see from this work that I have a lot of changes that I want to do. And I envision making these changes over the summer when fewer people will be using the guide and to have it ready for the fall cohort. And here I've listed some of my ideas, including a clear purpose statement, acknowledging bias on the homepage. I really want to highlight more student and faculty content in the Carolina Digital Repository because I work with a lot of students who are working on projects right now on health disparities, removing health disparities among marginalized groups. And so I would like to highlight some of that work, as well as hold focus groups with nursing students and faculty to make sure the guide is representative of their voices. So you can use my guide as inspiration of someone being at the beginning stages and needing to do a lot of work, and Stacy's guide as inspiration as something you can view that's already been completed for the most part. Okay, Stacy, next one. Oh, and then the next couple of slides, we just listed some more resources, and we'll provide a link to these slides. But if you want to see some example positionality statements, we've listed 3 of them here for you. For some ideas. And Stacy, the next slide has 2 of our resources we relied on heavily for our work. And the first one is Jamie Ding's presentation. And if you have not viewed this, I highly recommend you also watch that after our presentation today. And then the final slide is a list of more resources. And all of these resources are also found on the tool itself within the categories in which they apply. And so with that, I'm going to wrap my portion up. I'm going to pass it to Jamie Ding, who has been doing a lot of this work actually at a consortial level now, which is really exciting for us on this call, because I'm hoping that for all of us at different institutions in North Carolina, if we want to work together, we can learn from Jamie and her colleagues and maybe work together. So thank you, Jamie. I'll hand it to you.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you all for being here. My name is Jamie Ding. I use she, her pronouns, and this is all just really so exciting to hear. I'm looking forward to see how this work will be progressing, because even for us, it's always a process. At Cal Poly, we've been just a quick overview of what's been happening since that presentation. We've been fairly successful at coming together pretty frequently for these what we call LibGuide open review discussion sessions. So from a variety of departments in our library to have these conversations centered around criticality. And these conversations themselves have been a really key component for our work. We've also folded in students right now to attend these sessions. So that feedback has been really, really helpful. And our conversations have grown, I think, to become more thoughtful in terms of applying the ideas that are on the rubric or the evaluation tool. And so we have talked a lot about, with different LibGuides, about politics of citation, who we're prioritizing, what authorship means, even seemingly basic ideas like how we collectively describe or define what a database is. right? So these similar critical ideas and topics have spread across my library, our library here at Robert E. Kennedy Library, beyond just thinking about LibGuides. So applying this thought process, question process to a variety of disciplines and departments. So our archives department and special collections, our outreach department, and then also specifically, planning through this pandemic and all the decisions that have to go through that. This Thursday, we are continuing with our CSU-wide initiative. So what we have been doing is communicating to other Cal State University libraries. We're a consortium of 23. So part of that outreach is making sure that they feel comfortable enough adapting their own methods of review systems on their LibGuides, similar to what y'all have done here. And then we're also developing a system of creating a peer-to-peer network across campuses to have these kinds of conversations. So on Thursday, we're going to have our second LibGuide open review discussion session. We call it Lord's Pilot 2.0. Where we'll have representatives from about 5 CSUs come together to have a conversation using a rubric designed specifically for the CSUs as a whole. So the one at Cal Poly is pretty local, and then the ones that have been, developed for each local institution also are adjusted for those local institutions. So we've kind of zoomed out a little bit and developed a rubric for an overall conversation. This is the second one. Our first one had about 4 different institutions in December that came together and reviewed a LibGuide, talked about, the ideas, shared ideas about what reference means, how systems work at their library, and just talked in general what we're here to do, right? So I have a lot of this information, and we've also developed a toolkit for CSUs to start this kind of work, and all of that, and all of our past rubrics and discussions links are on this LibGuide. So we made a LibGuide for this LibGuide work, of course. And there's a lot more stuff there. Feel free to use. But thank you all for even having me and talking about this and doing this work.
Thanks so much, Jamie. We really appreciate having you here and hearing what you all are doing. So like Jamie said, our Jamie Conklin said, it's exciting to hear that it's spreading beyond Cal Poly and that we're sort of involved with it. So hi, everybody. I'm Michelle Colley. I'm the head of clinical, academic, and research engagement at the Health Sciences Library, and working with this team, with our great team here on this project, as Stacy mentioned at the beginning. So we have a short activity for you because we didn't want to just sit and kind of talk at you the whole time. So what we'd like to do is give you a little time to actually take a look at the tool that we're creating and engage with it. It is short, so I apologize. It would be lovely if it were about an hour for you to do that, but we just have a few minutes, but wanted to give you some time for that. So I'm going to put the link in the chat, and in there you will see a Word or a Google Doc in Word. And actually, can somebody else do that? I'm going to share my screen in the meantime instead. So let me pull up this. So hopefully you all can see my screen, the PowerPoint. Let me take a moment. Can folks see my screen? Okay, great. So, and hopefully the link is in the chat, but basically that's a link to our Google Docs folder. So in there is a Word document with the tool. There's also the slides that you can have for future reference. And then there's some reflection files. I think they're named feedback. And so spend a few minutes. I'm gonna be quiet for a few minutes and let you all take a look at that. And then if you could add some reflections to one of the files. I put some guides for your last name. It's okay if you don't do that exactly. It's more just so we don't have 70 people in the same document. So if you have a problem with the document you're working in, just pick another document. They're all the same. And if you can just add your reflections, questions, or comments, we'd love to hear what you think as you start to kind of take a look at the tool. And we'll do this for about 5 to 7 minutes. Please add questions to the chat or unmute yourself if you have questions. And otherwise, I'm going to stay quiet for a few minutes. This is going really fast. I'm glad to see all of you in the document. And I'm going to play a song, and that song is going to be our timer. So if the song is bothering you, feel free to turn down your volume, but we'll see how this goes. Can you guys hear it? Okay, so I'm gonna pull you all away. I appreciate you all jumping in, and I know this really wasn't nearly enough time to do this, but we appreciate you taking a look, and a few of you had a chance to add comments. I'm gonna do a quick poll before I turn it over to Sarah, who will lead our discussion to wrap us up. So if you could, hopefully you can still see my screen, on a scale of 1 to 5, just in the chat, answer using a number. How ready do you feel to apply this tool or a similar one to your LibGuides? So 1, you don't feel ready at all. 5, you're ready to start this afternoon. So go ahead and add your responses. And I will turn this over to Sarah.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah. I'm a graduate assistant at the Health Sciences Library. Thank you all for being here. So I'll just give about 30 seconds for y'all folks to put in your responses. So you can just type in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in the chat. I see a lot of 3s. Oh, 1, 4. It's cool. Okay. Okay, thank you, everyone. So just so we get better insight to like what is driving your responses, if anyone is so bold, for anyone who responded 1, so like you're not going to use this at all, can you please use the raise hand feature of Zoom, and then I will select somebody randomly. Or if you're more comfortable with typing in your reason for putting 1, that's also fine. I saw somebody responded 5. We have just one person who responded 5. If you don't mind me calling you out, you're like the only person. Would you be happy to explain like why you feel this will be easy for you to implement in your LibGuide? Or you can type it in the chat. Or you can
Sure, it was
choose not
me.
to.
I think I meant a 4, but I've done some of this work already for a while with the documentary collection and with the feature film collection. And so I feel like the framework you guys have in place is amazing and really aligns with a lot of the work that I've done for parts of the collection. So I think that you guys have laid it out well, and it would be something great to continue my work that I've been doing and using your framework.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your response. Just out of curiosity, did you use any structured framework for your work, or it's just done on the go?
No, it's been structured. I manage everything in Excel sheets. I work with faculty specifically in certain areas, and then I do a lot of work away from work with documentary film, and so I use a lot of the structure from work that I've done in consultation on global area film, and just trying to work with own voices, representation, how the films are authentic to in discussion of like who's making the film and about the subject. So it's been something that's been on my mind for as long as I've been working with documentary.
That's
that
really
makes sense.
interesting. Thank you for sharing.
Right.
We may reach out to you maybe to learn more and maybe collaborate. So that'll be really fun. So for those who picked, okay, I see a comment. So many guides do not include a purpose statement or the intended audience. This is a comment from the Google Docs. So these influence what is included on the guide and can help demonstrate any contextual factors. I think this should be standard on any guide, and it's something I hope to fix on my own guide soon. We totally agree. Like just putting that statement up there, even though it feels like working through the motions, we believe that having that statement there increases awareness. So the more we talk about these things, the more people get to see how important this type of work is, and the easier it would be like adopted or accepted. So having such statements is really helpful. Okay, so we have just about 3 minutes left for our session. Does anyone else have any comments or any more feedback? I see another comment from the activities. Doc said, how will you address privacy concerns with sharing personal info and stories? Also, can the tool provide examples of affirmations? Sharing personal information and stories should always be with consent from whoever owns that story and information. One way could be pseudonyms or like hiding stuff where you can. I feel like this is a very interesting question. Unfortunately, we're like really running out of time. I don't think I'll be able to do justice to this question in less than a minute, but you raise a very good point. Whoever asked this question. Also, can the tool provide examples of affirmations? From the LGBTQ+ LibGuide, you could get an example of like an affirmation statement there. And we should bear in mind that this is a work in progress. So we are revising whatever we do based on the feedback we get. And then for the positionality statement piece, for those who did that, you could also get examples from the positionality statement examples we put up. And if you have more comments, you could put in the Google Docs. We will try to respond to the comments on the doc within the coming weeks. So if you are really interested in the work, you can go back to the folder and include or go through whatever we have there. So that is all that time allows us to.
And Sarah, Sarah, thank you so much. I'm just gonna wrap up like 2 quick things. This went so fast. This was really great. Thank you for the engagement and interest. Just as Sarah said, it's an ongoing project. This is all draft. We're really thinking through this, and I'm reading through some of the comments that you put in the documents, and they're really good questions for us to think through. So we'll take those on and consider those in our meetings. The Google Docs links we'll leave open, so feel free to go and add comments after this. We'll be happy to, check back and take a look at those. The other thing is, I think Jamie Ding mentioned that they're creating more of a toolkit, and that's kind of our vision for this too. And so ideally, we'd like to have some examples and really fill it out. And the resources that we added, I saw some comments that people found that helpful. So we kind of see this as like a thing for, not only the tool itself, but some of the resources you could use, as well as examples and different things. So we really appreciate your interest, and please reach out if you're interested in following up with us. And we are out of time, but we're on time. That's something to be proud of.
Thank you everyone for attending. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you.